first thing I want you to do, I would like you to say your first name and your last name and then spell them, please.
Okay. So my name is Carly Bates. Should I be like looking at the camera?
Just look at
You?
the-
Okay. I'm like, okay. So my name is Carly Bates. It is spelled Karly for my first name, and then Bates for last name. Yeah.
And when you did your at TPA, were you a student teacher or an intern?
Student teacher.
And your content area is health?
Yes, correct.
So can you say that?
Yes, my content area is health.
And what grade level did you work at?
I worked with 8th grade at junior high.
Okay. And what school was that?
Centennial Junior High.
So I'm going to ask you to just think back over your kind of process in completing the TPA and ask you some questions about it. So first of all, if you could think about what is it? Why do you think the School of Education asked you to complete this assessment?
Well, first and foremost, I feel like UVU specifically wants to be like the front runner in education. And that's something that I really love about having gone here and wanting to be a teacher. So now that this is kind of a new thing to Utah, I think that's part of why UVU, specifically the School of Education, was so excited about it. As I was starting to look through all the different components, the very many components of the TPA, it seems to really take something from every single course that we take preparing to teach. It takes a little bit from everything, some kind of more from different classes than others, but it really combines everything and makes you reflect on that experience that you learned in the classroom here at UVU, and then when you're implementing it in the classroom wherever we're interning or student teaching at.
So as you think about the whole process for you, can you think about now, can you identify anything that you did in the TPA assessment that will serve you as a teacher?
Absolutely. So especially as I was planning, the EdTPA, the different rubrics that you have to meet and you're graded by, if everything doesn't align and meet the components that we should be as teachers, you're not going to get a good score on it. And so as I was planning, there would be things that I thought were like fun activities or whatnot, but it really didn't meet the goal that I wanted the students to achieve. So it kind of in a way forced me to think about anyway how I can restructure some of the things that were my gut instinct to try and make it so that it really was serving the students first instead of doing something that I just thought would be good, if that kind of makes sense. So planning especially, there were things that I was tweaking before and really making sure everything was aligning the way that it should be, that it was meeting the different vocabulary requirements that we should be in secondary, and just really reflecting on that whole process. And it kind of took me out of the spotlight, I guess, of, I think this is cool. I think they would like this. It made me think, okay, all about my different students and for the one specific class, and really all of them, but especially the one specific class that I used for my EdTPA experience. And it had them at the focus from all of these different angles, which was a little overwhelming, but it really helped me realize, wow, this is the standard. And when I start, real teaching, not that I wasn't as a student teacher, but when I'm out on my own, this is what I should be doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so in thinking now about completing the portfolio, do you think of anything that was especially challenging for you?
Well, for me specifically, just the time management, because there is so much to it. And initially, when we first had our orientation meeting, actually in the fall, so before we even started student teaching, to kind of get us a feel for what it was like, holy crap, there's so much. Because by the time it's done and finished, it's literally I don't even know. I probably don't want to go count it because it would just make me be like, holy cow, I wrote so much. But just each of the different tasks, it probably was well over 50 pages, single-spaced of work. So for me, one of the challenging components was really figuring out, okay, I need to just kind of pacing myself and not letting it just totally overwhelm me because as we learn as teachers, if sometimes as students, you see the big end product and it's like, I can't do it. So it was really challenging to kind of try and find out a way that worked for me so that I could still meet the students' needs on a day-to-day basis. And I also, kind of funny, I was also a head softball coach for high school, and it was my first year doing that. So I was student teaching, doing the Ed TPA, and coaching softball. And so all of that was a lot to juggle. And if I wouldn't have set kind of deadlines that I wanted to at least try to meet, then I would have been just scrambling at the end. And I still was, I guess, a little bit, but I think probably a lot of people, that's kind of the experience. But it was doable in that way. It was also, one thing that was kind of challenging was the second task, where we had to reflect on the video component of our teaching.
Describe a little bit about what the second task was.
Okay, so the second task, you have to film yourself, and I chose to film all 3 of the days from start to finish, so I had a lot to kind of pick and choose from. And I also filmed 2 classes, because there was 2 classes that I was kind of teetering on which to choose. So I did a lot of filming. So you film yourself teaching, and you end up selecting a portion, like a part of a lesson. I think it's anywhere from 3 to 20 minutes. And I ended up using like the full 20 minutes for my video segment. And you take that, you watch, you kind of transcribe some of the dialogue that happens, explain what's happening in the lesson, and then reflect on what you did, why you did it, then also what you would do differently. And it's really hard to watch yourself teach. There's a lot of things that you realize, I don't know, for me, I just feel awkward watching a video of myself anyway, and I'm probably gonna die if I ever see this. But it's really uncomfortable kind of getting open and having the humility to see yourself for what you are, whether it's the good things, the bad things, and then learning from that. And it was actually really cool because when I was doing that, there were other teachers at the junior high. They have it set up in like houses, kind of like pods type of setup. And there were other teachers that filmed themselves as well. And we talked about that experience. And they, of course, weren't going near as much in depth of the reflection process as what I was for task 2. But it's really eye-opening. For example, I learned my filler word is K. And if I feel awkward, okay, K, So, and that's kind of hard to see sometimes. And so it's really, that in itself for me was a little bit of a challenge. But I definitely learned from it and grew from it. Okay, this is what I would do differently or how I could do it better. For example, one part of the video that I didn't choose to include, I was writing up on the board. The students were kind of brainstorming some of the way their body feels when they are in the most stressful situation they could imagine. So, sweaty, scared, nervous, failure, like these different feelings. And I was up on the board writing, and there would be times where I'd be talking to the board. And I'm like, dang it, I need to turn and acknowledge it and then write. But it's so hard when you're trying to do this and that. And so it makes me think, okay, how could I do this better? Maybe it wasn't totally awful, but how could I do it better?
So you touched on this a little bit already, but if you could give advice to people who are just starting the process right now, what advice would you give them?
One of the big things is really getting organized, because when the whole process is said and done, there are a lot of different documents that you're submitting. Whether it's you use Google Docs and you're using that platform, or whether you're using Microsoft. For me, it was really, really helpful to have different folders, a task 1 folder, a task 2 folder, a task 3 folder. Okay, this is all of my lesson materials for lesson plan 1, for lesson plan 2, for lesson plan 3, or however many whoever's doing this would choose to use. And just making it so that there's somewhere something to be. And I would actually have in my little EdTPA notebook, I don't know what you call it, I actually had a checklist of what I've started, what I still need to do, so that I knew, okay, I'm here. And I also, for me, one of the hardest parts, I probably should have mentioned this in the last part, but one of the hardest tasks was the planning commentary of task 1. That is kind of a beast there's so much to it. And early in the process, I was trying to do that first. And I had so much that I wanted to say, but I kind of didn't know the right way of saying it. So rather than get just hung up on, I can't finish this task, I still have a couple questions I need to do, I kind of took a break. And then I moved on to another part that I had and was ready and able to do. So that way I wasn't pushing everything back. I knew that, I had a little bit more to do with that, which maybe that's not a good thing considering it was the planning part, I guess. But I knew what I wanted to say, but the words weren't coming out. So I kind of rested from that, and then I worked on some of the other tasks so that I wasn't doing it all last minute, just kind of the tweaking here and there, if that makes sense.
So I want you to think now about if one of your colleagues at school, or maybe somebody in the community said, so what is EdTPA? And I've been hearing this and I don't know what it is. Can you explain what it is, and can you kind of start with the words like the EdTPA assessment?
Yeah, let me try and think of a way to explain it. To me, the best way to explain it, especially to someone that is familiar with UVU School of Education, the EdTPA assessment is taking everything that you have learned at UVU or in your education prep courses, whether it's here or wherever, and it's taking all that you've learned and culminating it into this assessment, that shows that you really know your stuff. I don't think, this is probably a poor way of saying it, but I don't think you can BS your way through the EdTPA. You really have to know so many of these different things that you're expected to know and be able to do as a teacher. And the cool thing about the EdTPA assessment is that you're not expected to be perfect, but you are expected to have an idea of where you're at and where you want to be and how you can get there. And so it's just, the EdTPA assessment is just this big planning and reflection are kind of the two big components that it's on your teaching practices and how you did and what you would do to be better.
Thank you. So is there anything else you'd like to add that I haven't asked you about?
I guess just some advice about the whole thing is it's really hard. And I knew it was going to be, but sometimes when you're in the trenches, as a way of saying it, when you're in the trenches teaching every day, it's really hard to kind of shift from, okay, this is what I'm planning, weeks out in advance, very in depth, versus this is what I'm teaching tomorrow. Sometimes it's kind of hard to juggle those different requirements that are asked of you as a student teacher. And you have to realize that the students come first. The EdTPA is a means to have you think about your students and plan your lessons with them in mind. And it does so in a very in-depth way. And you can't get discouraged, I guess, is something I would say. And sometimes that's easier said than done. For me, I the day before it was due, I stayed up till 4 a.m. finishing and making tweaks, and then submitted it to Dr. Cox so that she could revise it for me. Not revise it for me, but look at it and suggest revisions for me to make, I guess I should say. And I got about an hour and a half of sleep that night and woke up because the school that I was student teaching at was a 40-minute drive. And that was a hard day. And if I had maybe managed my time a little bit differently, it would have been better to have maybe had that spread out, the week or two before it was due rather than all then and there. But because I actually did get a little bit discouraged at a certain point, but the day it's due, you've got to have it done, right? So just don't get discouraged, and sometimes you just have to, okay, I'm going to work on this for however many hours and take breaks during it, because if you don't, you'll just be like, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. And kind of the way the EdTPA set up, with the central focus, you kind of are saying some of the same things over and over and over again. But you can't get in your own head. You've got to just realize that there's a really, really good, genuine purpose for it. And then when you see that, it makes the difficulty of it, that sounds so weird. It makes the difficulty of the whole project a lot easier.
All right, that's it.
Yeah, sorry. Hopefully there's something to use.
That was great.
I'm like probably doing this thing.